Welcome to my show. I'm Barrie-Louise Switzen. The Women's Connection is a program about events shaping women's lives and helping them get authentic power. Our guest today is one such woman who has spread her authentic power globally. And I would like to welcome Mildred Leet. Millie,
I'm
thank you
delighted.
so much for joining me today.
It means a great deal to be here and talking with you and talking about my favorite subject, reaching out to the people of the world and hoping that their lives become a little bit better as a result of our efforts.
Well, I hope so too. I think it's great. Why don't we start with the project that you started in 1979, the Trickle Up program, and tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it was in 1979 that my husband and I developed a process to reach the poorest of the poor. And that was resulted from both Glenn and myself having experience in the international field and hearing at the United Nations over and over again in the 1970s that the poor were getting poorer, the rich were getting richer. How do you reach the poorest of the poor? How do you try to find some way in which to recognize that the trickle down really did not benefit total society, but rather try to see a way in which you could reach the people, give them that push to get started, and have them trickle up. That's how we got the name, Trickle Up.
That's fabulous.
And it was an exciting process, and Glenn and I told this to a number of people, and they all smiled, and they said, "Oh, that's lovely, dear." And that, of course, took care of that. So we ended up by taking $1,000 of our own money and trying to decide on a country in which we could experiment with the process. And so we selected Dominica in the Caribbean.
Now, why did you select the Caribbean and not in New York in your backyard, so to speak?
Truth of the matter is, it wasn't that one or the other. It was that both Glenn's and my experience were internationally.
All right.
And so we had friends there. We were very much aware of the needs of the international community and thought maybe as a result of our experience, Glenn with community development, myself with women, I thought that we might try. Dominica is very close to the United States. English speaking, it had -5% economic growth, 45% unemployment.
That's huge.
It's a lot, yes. 45% unemployment. However, when we say it's huge, everything is comparative. We here in the United States are very fortunate. We have, 4.5% unemployment. But most of the developing countries have a large amount of unemployment or underemployment. Those were the kinds of people we were trying to reach.
So what was your first step once you decided that you were going to put the seed money out?
Well, what we did is we called the community development officer in Dominica and asked him, was he willing to experiment with this process of helping people towards self-employment? And he said, sure. So we took the next plane down and we met him, and he gathered together a group of voluntary agencies like women's clubs and church groups and business groups and a British volunteer and his field staff. And Glenn and I talked about the process of Trickle Up. And it was very well received, and the process was understood. But what was interesting, and I'll jump ahead a little bit to tell you that when we give our startup capital, total grant is $100, given in two $50 installments.
Well, how did you come up with the total grant of $100 at $50 installments?
Well, when you look at the amount of unemployment and how much it would take to start small businesses,
right,
then we figured out $100 might do it, but startup capital, maybe $50 would. And we decided to do it $100 worldwide because, one, we were trying to set up an economic process that was easy, so that everybody knew it was $100. They couldn't bargain, as someone tried to do when, well, if you only give me $1,500, I could buy a tractor. And we said, well, sure, but that's not us.
Right.
And so we started with the $50 and the $50, and a lot of people said, $50? Are you kidding? But then there were
Ungracious.
yeah, and other people said, oh, I have constituencies for whom that $50 startup capital would really make a difference. And so that first trip down, 10 businesses were started.
That must have been satisfying,
It
gratifying.
was very exciting. I might tell you that when we went back 7 years later, 7 out of the 10 businesses were still continuing.
Wow, that's marvelous.
Yes, we were very excited. We were excited actually with the people in Dominica and what they did.
How did they select the first 10 recipients?
Well, we actually, when I introduced the process, there were only a few agencies that said they were interested in introducing it. And so they would go back to their clubs and say, if you're interested in starting a business, come and let's talk. And so Glenn and I would go with that particular, what we call coordinator or agency head, and explain to them that if they completed a business plan, they would get the first $50. And a couple of months later, if they completed a business report, they get the final $50.
But who taught them how to do a business plan? And did most of these people,
Well,
while they spoke English, could they read and write?
in Dominica, yes, but in many of the countries, we're now in 115 countries,
Wow.
many of the countries they don't. But that's where the agency comes in.
Okay.
They are the ones who walk them through that business plan, which asks them, well, what do you want to produce? And where are you going to market it? Who's your competition? And how much profit are you going to make? Now, these are all questions that you have to answer if you really want to go in business.
Did you find that you had more people applying for the grants
Well, we do.
than, okay, but back then, were more people applying that weren't really qualified or said they really wanted the money just to have the money?
We never
versus-
encountered that,
Okay.
which is very interesting you're asking that, because we found that these people who decided to fill out a business plan, let's say they knew how to bake, so they were going to start a bakery, or someone made school uniforms. Well, this would give them startup capital. And it was that kind of thing. A whole group of women wanted to raise chickens for eggs because there was a scarcity of eggs on the island. So you see, each one were using skills they already had.
So they wanted to expand their
And
skills.
yes, so they were, many of them, well, this was a great opportunity to go into a business which they hadn't thought through before and earn the capital that they need.
Now, would you say that most of these requests came from women, or did they come from men?
Well, the curious thing is you're asking that. We asked both men and women. There was no difference. But we have found that over 2/3 of the businesses are started and carried out by women.
Because they feel that they can succeed, or they have
Well-
more of an entrepreneurial mind,
Well,
that they can do it?
Yes, that too, but also they are the poorest of the poor. And again, and this is worldwide, women accept the responsibility for the care and feeding of their children.
Mhm.
And so that they're so eager to find a way in which they can supplement their income or make that their total business. And so it has been the case that women have opted to start these businesses and they stay in it longer. Do they become millionaires? No. But did their children go to school? And did the girls go to school? Yes, because you know girls are the last to be given that opportunity.
I think that's marvelous. Did you find that there was resistance from the men helping the women?
No, there was not resistance. I think that in some countries, not in Dominica,
Okay.
but in some countries to which we went subsequently, we did find that men were rather reluctant to have their women engage in business. But then when they saw the women earning money and making their lives better, they accepted it.
But initially there was
Yes,
resistance.
there's reluctance, and in some, the men insisted on signing the business plan so that they would have the authority. But then when it came to completing the business report, the women ended up by entering that business report. You know, what we also found when I talk business report, that means simple how much money goes out and how much money comes in. And if you keep records like that, the chances are you're going to stay in business much more probably because you're keeping
You're
a record.
focused. You're focused.
Yes, absolutely. And it's been a very exciting thing to recognize this. There's one of our coordinators, actually from Brooklyn, New York, who has said, if you don't have a plan, then don't plan on being in business.
That's very true.
Yes.
Now, I also, in your annual report here that you gave me, you said you have a 10-step process. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Sure. Well, I have practically
He's
given you
given it, I know.
parts of it. Actually, it is alerting those agencies within a country
Okay.
that there is a process called Trickle Up. Are they interested? And then they would complete a coordinator application, and then we would view it, and then they would introduce the business plan, and then we would send the check, because what we do is it's two $50 checks. The first check is $50,
Right.
and we send that on to the agency. And then the second check is $50, which we complete in the home office, which is New York City. And it works out exceedingly well in that fashion. And then what we do is ask them for reports if they can after a year, so that we try to figure out how long they stay in business, what are the difficulties they have had, and establish a relationship not so much with the entrepreneur, but more so with the coordinating agency, because they would be able to pick up and say, well, perhaps this question was something they didn't understand, or perhaps we could simplify the business recordings.
What would you say is the biggest obstacle that these women have had going forward?
I think normal business. I don't know that if they select to go into a business which they know the product they are producing, how to make it, they know their market, then it does make a difference. I remember being in the Philippines and visiting a woman who, when we first went to meet her, had started with that $50 on a small table in this market. She had some vegetables displayed, and she was doing fairly well and was encouraged. We went back the next year, and there we saw she had double the amount. And we said, well, it's obvious you're doing very well. And I said, tell me something about yourself. What was special about the result of what you've been doing? She said, well, you know, we have a simple house, and I used to have to bend over in order to enter the house. But now I've been able to lift the doorway, and now I can walk into my doorway with my head up high.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yes, it really was. And
that's quite a success story.
And and so success is really in the eyes of the producers, of the entrepreneurs.
Right.
It's not us. We may feel that education is utterly the most important thing, but I think of a woman from Nepal who said, oh, education is very important, but I want to fix my house up first, because in case my children have to help me in the fields, I want to know they have a proper home to come home to after they've worked all day. So there it is again, that balance that we have to think of in
like you
terms
said,
of developing.
Success is different in every country, every
Yeah.
person. It's basically in the eyes of the beholder.
Yes, yeah, that's exactly it. It's been a very exciting thing to see the process acceptable now, as I said, in 115 countries. And I look back and I realize now it's 66,000 businesses.
66,000 businesses.
Which really, over 300,000 men and women have had their lives improved as a result of their own work and using their own skills. I think part of it is a belief in people, which has motivated Glenn and myself. We felt people don't want to be poor.
No, but you've
We
given
felt
them
an
the
opportunity.
the incentive to really
Yes.
make something of
And
themselves.
you know, they reach out for it, they want it, and they take it and they run with it.
How old would you say is the oldest business going forward now?
Well, I must tell you, there is in Dominica, at that time in 1979, a business was started for a young woman with her friends selling ice cream. Now you think in that hot Caribbean country.
It would kind of melt.
But they had
good.
ice bricks and things like that, and they would sell the ice cream, and they did very well. And she saved her money, and with her other friends, they started a revolving fund, and they each would put a little money in over the year, and each one would take it out. One would take it out for 1 month, and one would take it out another. And the first thing she bought was an ice cream cart. And I went to a conference in Brazil on the environment, and I heard somebody saying, and it was the Trickle Up program, and I walked in, and there was this wonderful woman talking about Trickle Up and how we had given her that impetus to get started, and that here it was, at that time it was maybe 11 years later, but it's still going on now, so
It's pretty good.
yes, it's pretty good. And she said with her latest funds, she was able to buy a refrigerator with a freezer, and she said now she's able to make ice pops, and that takes care of the cost of the electricity. So you realize how one thing after another, but why was this woman at this conference on the environment? Actually, it was 1972. She was there because she ended up by improving herself and her livelihood, and then she looked around her community, and she realized that the soil was eroding, there weren't proper trees, there were lots of rats and insects around, and she alerted the community and became a leader in the community for cleaning up her backyard, which was her community.
Wow.
So that's the nice thing, and that we like to think that people who start their own business and are concerned with themselves then can move to the next step, worrying about where they live and how to enhance the rest of their community.
So while it's a trickle-up theory, it's also a trickle-down theory because it's helping everybody else,
Yes,
which
yeah.
is beautiful. While we've talked about all the wonderful success stories here, have you had any ones that really fell through the crack or somebody gave up for certain reasons?
No, we find that people, the businesses don't continue for a number of reasons. Usually it's more 3 or 4 people who enter into a business together. That's a support system. They may have a falling out. Some people end up by getting jobs, and so that they leave their businesses, and as a result of getting encouragement, they've
Self-esteem.
self-esteem, thank you, that's a very important word in our language. And they have ended up by going off somewhere else. Some of the businesses fail. Of course, that happens normally. I remember being in Limon in Costa Rica and going back there and asking the agency, I said, where is that wonderful basket weaving project? And I said, well, how come they failed? She said, they didn't fail. They were all doing so well, they each went into business for themselves. But I realized if I had not asked that question, I would have put it down as a failure.
Well, that's terrible that they didn't tell you the great success that's going on here.
It's very difficult for agencies to keep in communication. It's difficult for us to ask agencies that aren't well funded, who are volunteer agencies, to take the time. Some of them are absolutely wonderful about it. Others find it very difficult.
Well, I was going to say, I know you're on the web and on the internet, and
That's
I know
right.
Trickle Up is on the internet
sure are.
with your own web page. So, but then again, when you go to some of these third world countries, they don't have computers and they're not computer literate. So it would make it difficult.
It does make a difference. However, there's something wonderful called a fax, and that works in every country.
Today.
Yes. And so it's been a fairly good exchange. You asked, what is one of the things that I had wished for, and
Right.
maybe that would be that Trickle Up would be recognized as one of the valuable ways for people to emerge from unemployment and underemployment to self-employment. And I'd like to spread the word, the whole world to know about it and incorporate it into their development schemes.
Well, you've had this success on a personal level. Have the government embraced this in some countries? In other countries, they've kind of pushed it aside because it's more
Well,
seen as...
the interesting thing about governments, they're really very happy to see us, because I don't know of a government that isn't concerned when they're being elected about the poor. That's going to be their priority.
Right.
But when they get in, they find it isn't usually the focus. And so here comes an agency that's concerned with reaching the poorest of the poor and helping them. We've had no difficulty from any country. They've all been very happy that we've been there. And, but we have not really started working with them. What we work with great success is the United Nations Development Program.
Ah, I don't know too much about that, but it sounds great.
They're in every country, and we work cooperatively with them. And not only do we work with their volunteers and their staff, but they have UN volunteers, who are just wonderful, as are the Peace Corps volunteers. They're also wonderful promoters of Trickle Up, and they work diligently in the developing countries, helping people help themselves.
Now, after the initial $100 that they've been given, can they apply for more funding?
No, it's $100, and that's it.
That's it.
And that's so that they realize part of our requirement when you ask for the 10 steps, which I never completed, part of it is asking each one of them to plow back at least 20% of their profits so they learn to build their own capital. Because our whole business plan is really a training program, an in-service training program, learning by doing how you start and continue in a business. So it goes beyond just that $50. It's really forcing them to think through how can you stay in a business, because poor people have been in and out of businesses all their lives.
Well, I think it's also the support system that you've got built in with the community helping them when they've got a problem. I mean, there are the days that you're not going to make a profit and you're going to feel down. It's a support system.
That's
and
right.
Other women supporting other women.
Yes.
Whereas the men, I just think that they're more geared to working and not so much the entrepreneur. Look at this country. You have more women entrepreneurs employing more people.
Yes,
than
that's a
the
wonderful
Fortune
figure.
500
Yes,
companies.
I know. But
So-
actually, we do have some men. We do work with, as I said, 2/3 women. But we work with displaced people, because as you know, throughout the world, there are many unfortunate events within disasters, natural and man-made, and human-made. And the youth are now the majority in many of the countries, over 50%. And if there are not enough jobs around, that leaves for inequity developing and disturbances, social disturbances.
What is the youngest recipient of your money?
What is
the youngest recipient of your grant?
the youngest recipient? Gee, I don't really know. But I do know of an 11-year-old who was standing outside of a little shack with his 8 members of the family,
Yeah.
and they were making tortillas, and they were very proud because they had, with the money they had earned, been able to buy a new oven, so they were being more efficient. And they then handed me their business report, and I looked at this beautiful script, and I said, who completed this business report? And they pointed with pride to this 11-year-old boy.
How beautiful.
Now that was just wonderful, because you realized you were training 2 generations.
That is fabulous.
Yeah.
Millie, you, beyond Trickle Up, one of the other major foundations that you funded or was a founder of, as I stumble over the words here, was United Cerebral Palsy.
Yes,
In the closing moments of the program, why don't you just tell us a little bit of how you got involved in that?
Well, it was one of my dearest friends had a cerebral palsy child, and she was very interested in having us start a movement in the United States to bring the shame of cerebral palsy and transfer it to recognition that something can be done. And so there were 40 women, and together we started United Cerebral Palsy. And it did gain a great deal of acceptance, and people no longer accept it as a horror, but realize there is something you can do about it, that they can lead useful lives. And it has been a very satisfactory kind of recognition that if someone sees an inequity in the society, in your neighborhood, there is something you can do about it. Does it take a little extra effort? Sure it does. Does it mean you have to change your order of priorities in your life? Yes, it does. But if you are convinced that maybe it's going to make a difference, you just try.
Well, Millie, I want to thank you for making a difference for everybody around.
That's real nice of you to say.
And I'm
Thank you.
so pleased to have you as a guest.
Well, it's been a pleasure. You've given me a great joy to be able to talk this way about my favorite subjects.
And thank you. And wonderful having you also. If you would like more information, you can contact Millie Leet at the Trickle Up program at 121 West 27th Street, New York, New York 10001. And you can also write me at The Woman's Connection, Ansonia Station, Post Office Box 918, New York, New York 10023, or you can email me, Barrie, BARRIENYC, at worldnet.att.net. Look forward to hearing from you. Millie, it's been terrific. Tape media, courtesy of Quantigy.